Welcome to the monk's temple. Find a comfortable position, and let the outside world soften. There's no need to adjust, no need to prepare. Just breathe, and arrive here, now. I'd like to share a story with you, one that unfolded many years ago in a quiet coastal village. There was a fisherman there, known not for his great catches, but for his peculiar habit. Every evening, as the other boats returned laden with fish, he would return with just enough for his family. And every evening, as the others mended their nets and boasted of their day, he would sit on the dock, watching the horizon long after the sun had set. People talked, of course. They said he was lazy, that he lacked ambition, that he didn't understand the real work of life. For years, he never answered them. He simply watched the sea. Then, one season, a terrible storm collapsed the main pier where all the other boats were moored, destroying them. The village was in despair. But the old fisherman walked to a sheltered, hidden cove known only to him, a cove he had found during all those evenings of watching, a place of perfect safety. His boat was untouched. And because he knew the sea's moods from his silent vigils, he was the only one who could navigate the strange currents after the storm. He alone fed the village until the others could rebuild. He never said, "I told you so." He never explained his nightly watch. His actions, when the moment of crisis came, spoke with a clarity that shattered all the old gossip. The results were his only testimony. If this way of being, of letting action carry the weight, calls to you, I warmly invite you to subscribe to the Monk's Temple. It allows you to return to this space of quiet wisdom whenever you need. We spend so much of our lives in commentary. Narrating, justifying, defending. We believe that if we can just explain ourselves perfectly, we will be seen, understood, and finally find peace. But Buddhism guides us to look deeper. That urge to explain, that tightness in the chest when we're misunderstood, it's rarely about truth. It's about attachment. Not attachment to things, but to an identity. To the story we tell ourselves about who we are, the capable one, the kind one, the misunderstood one. When that story is challenged, the self feels threatened. We scramble to repair the narrative in others' minds, mistaking that repair for a search for truth. The Buddhist teaching cuts through this clearly. Suffering arises from craving and aversion. Here, we crave the pleasant feeling of being perceived correctly, and we averse the unpleasant feeling of being perceived wrongly. Our explanations are often just attempts to manage this emotional economy, to trade discomfort for temporary relief. But the relief is always borrowed, dependent on the next person's agreement. The peace that depends on external conditions is a fragile peace. Imagine an ancient tree in a deep forest. Seasons pass. Animals scratch its bark, birds nest in its branches, moss grows on its north side, vines climb its trunk. The tree does not protest, I am not a scratching post. This moss misrepresents me. The vines are giving the wrong impression. It simply continues its work of drawing water from the deep earth and reaching for the light. Its existence is its statement. It understands a truth we have forgotten. It does not need to manage the perceptions of the birds or the vines to be a tree. Its life is the result. We are not so different. Our true nature doesn't require constant footnotes. But we live like librarians of our own reputations, frantically reshelving the misunderstandings of others, instead of living in the story itself. Let me offer a new metaphor. Consider your mind as a deep, clear spring. The water is your innate clarity, your peace. Every time you feel compelled to explain yourself, it's as if someone has thrown a handful of mud into the spring. Your immediate reaction is to plunge your hands in and stir frantically, trying to clear the water by your own action. But stirring only spreads the mud. The more you thrash, the cloudier it becomes. All your explanations, your defenses, your clarifications. They are the thrashing. Silence and right action are the opposite. They are the patient stillness that allows the mud to settle on its own. The spring, left undisturbed, possesses its own cleansing intelligence. Your work is not to clear the water, but to stop stirring it. To trust that clarity is the default state, not something you must manufacture through verbal effort. This is the heart of the Buddha's path. It's a transfer of trust. From the fragile power of words to the solid power of principled action. Words are like wind. They can be warm or cold, gentle or harsh, but they pass through. Actions are like stones placed in a stream. They divert the current, they create patterns that last. 1,000 explanations about your direction are less convincing than taking one firm, calm step in that direction. The world may argue with your reasons, but it has no choice but to engage with your movement. I remember a student who came to me, her life filled with noise. She was a manager, and every decision she made was followed by emails, meetings, and memos explaining her rationale. She was exhausted. She believed this transparency was leadership. But her team was confused, anxious, and always debating her reasoning rather than executing the work. I asked her to try a week of action without annotation. To make her decisions with care, but to communicate only the decision itself, not the internal debate that led to it. To trust her judgment enough to let it stand alone. The first day was terrifying for her. She felt exposed, arrogant. But by the third day, she noticed a shift. Her team, freed from the labyrinth of her explanations, began to focus on the task itself. Their own creativity emerged. The results of the projects began to improve, not because they understood her mind better, but because they were empowered to use their own. Her silence had created space for competence to grow. Her need to be seen as a thoughtful leader had been blocking the very leadership she sought to provide. When she detached from that need, the results, a more capable, confident team, spoke eloquently of her true effectiveness. This is the subtle alchemy of restraint. When you withhold the explanation, you invite observation. When you provide the explanation, you often preempt understanding. People become critics of your script rather than witnesses to your life. Buddhism teaches right speech, which is as much about knowing when not to speak as knowing what to say. A truth spoken to soothe your own ego is not right speech, even if the facts are correct. A beneficial truth spoken at the wrong time is just noise. The Buddha himself was a master of this economy. He did not engage in every debate. He did not chase down every critic to correct their view. He understood that some minds are only opened by the slow, steady drip of consistent example, not the forceful hammer of argument. His life was his primary teaching. His peace in the face of insult, his compassion in the face of anger, his stillness in the midst of chaos, these were the unassailable arguments. People followed him because they saw a result they longed for, freedom from suffering. They saw it in his posture, in his eyes, in his actions, long before they fully understood his words. So we begin here. Not with a new strategy for winning arguments, but with a courage to stop arguing altogether. Not with better explanations, but with a commitment to more aligned action. The journey is from being a commentator on your life to being the author of it. The pen is not your tongue. It is your choice in this very moment. What will you write with your silence? What story will your next action tell? Let's continue. Let your breath be easy. Let the space between thoughts grow a little wider. In that space, we'll explore a different kind of story, one about roots rather than branches. There was a gardener who tended the grounds of an old temple. He was meticulous. Every weed was plucked, every path was raked into perfect lines. One year, a wild, climbing vine began to grow at the base of the temple's eastern wall. It was not in the plan. It disrupted the clean lines. The gardener's first impulse was to tear it out. It was an explanation waiting to be erased, a messy, unauthorized growth. But he was busy, and he let it be for a week. Then another. The vine grew, reaching tendrils up the ancient stones. To his surprise, it bore small, delicate flowers that bloomed only at dawn, filling the air with a sweet, fleeting scent. Birds came to nest in its tangle. The wall, which had seemed stark and severe, now looked embraced, alive. The gardener never did remove it. He realized the temple grounds were not a painting to be kept under glass, but a living system. His idea of order was just one possibility. The vine, without ever explaining its purpose, had expanded the beauty of the place. The gardener's initial aversion was a clinging to his identity as the creator of order. His eventual acceptance was a small enlightenment. He saw that sometimes, the best action is non-action. The best response to something that doesn't fit your story is not to edit the thing, but to expand the story. This mirrors a profound Buddhist principle, anatta, or non-self. It's not that you don't exist, but that what you call self is a fluid, interdependent process, not a fixed statue needing constant defense. The statue, your solid identity, feels threatened by misunderstandings. But the flowing river of your being, it incorporates the mud, the leaves, the rocks, and keeps moving. When you cling to the statue, every misunderstanding is a vandal. When you rest in the river, every misunderstanding is just more water, passing through. Your compulsive explanations are the equivalent of building a fence around the statue and posting guards. It's exhausting, and it makes the statue the center of a fortress, not a gift in a garden. Think of your awareness as the sky. Thoughts, feelings, perceptions, these are weather. A misunderstanding is a dark, sudden cloud. The ego, the sense of a separate me, looks up and panics. It believes the cloud is permanent, that it defines the sky, that it might even poison the sky. So it tries to argue with the cloud. It points to patches of blue, it cites weather reports, it shouts that the cloud is wrong. But the sky itself? Vast, silent, undisturbed. It holds the cloud without being damaged by it. The cloud will pass, or it will rain, and the sky will remain. Your practice is to identify less with the frantic weather reporting of the ego, and more with the silent, spacious sky of awareness. From that vantage point, the need to explain the weather seems almost humorous. Why would the sky need to justify a cloud? A young musician once shared with me his agony. He had composed a piece that was deeply personal, abstract. At its first small performance, a critic wrote that it was directionless, emotionally opaque. The musician was crushed. For months, he carried that review. He drafted long letters to the critic, never sent. He thought of adding program notes to future performances, explaining the meaning of each movement. He was trying to redirect the cloud. I asked him a simple question: was the music true for you when you wrote it? He said yes. Then, I suggested, the music is complete. Its truth is independent of the review. Your job now is not to explain that truth, but to write the next true piece. Let the old piece be what it is, a cloud that passed over your sky. Your sky is clear enough to create again. He stopped writing the letters. He wrote no program notes. He simply composed again. Years later, that same early piece was rediscovered and celebrated for its brave ambiguity. The cloud had not changed, the cultural weather had simply shifted. His faithfulness to his own creative sky, not his arguments about a single cloud, allowed his work to endure and find its own moment of understanding. The Buddha taught that we suffer because we grasp. We grasp at pleasant experiences, we push away unpleasant ones, and we grasp most tightly at our idea of who we are. This grasping is the source of the heat, the tightness, the urgency. When you feel that urgency to explain, you are feeling the grasp. Your hand is clenched around a specific outcome: they must see me this way. To loosen the suffering, you don't need to win the outcome, you need to loosen the grasp. You need to open your hand and see what's actually in it. Often, it's just a story, fragile as a dried leaf. Letting it crumble is not a defeat. It's the discovery that your hand is now free to touch, to create, to hold something real. Let me introduce another metaphor. Imagine you are a lens. When you are clear, still, and correctly aligned, you can focus sunlight into a single, potent point that can ignite tinder. That focused point is your effective action in the world. But when you are jostled by the need for approval or fear of judgment, the lens trembles. The light scatters. It becomes a diffuse glow. Pleasant, perhaps, but powerless to ignite anything. All your explanations are attempts to steady the lens by telling the sunlight how to behave. It's futile. The sun shines. The lens must steady itself. Your discipline, your meditation, your commitment to right action, these are the adjustments that bring the lens to stillness. Once still, the focused light of your actions becomes transformative, and no explanation of optics is required. The fire is the proof. We live in a world that worships the glow and fears the fire. It encourages us to scatter our light widely on social media, to illuminate our every thought and feeling, to be seen glowing everywhere. But this diffuse glow creates no warmth, cooks no food, lights no way forward. It merely makes us visible in the fog. The Buddha's way is the path of the focused lens. It values the silent, concentrated heat that comes from a still mind aligned with purpose. This is why monastic disciplines exist. Not as punishments, but as practices to stop the trembling of the lens. Every time you choose a purposeful action over an anxious explanation, you are polishing that lens. I recall a time, years ago, walking through a crowded market. I saw a stall owner angrily berating a young boy who had, it seemed, knocked over a basket of fruit. The boy was stammering, trying to explain, he was pushed, he didn't see it, he was sorry. Each explanation made the stall owner angrier. It was a spiral of noise. An elderly woman, a regular at the market, walked over. She didn't look at the man or the boy. Without a word, she simply knelt and began picking up the fruit, carefully checking each for bruising and placing them back in the basket. Her silence was immense. It created a bubble of calm in the chaos. After a moment, the stall owner stopped shouting. Then, he too knelt and began to help. Finally, the boy, tears still on his cheeks, joined in. Within a minute, the basket was righted, the fruit was saved. The woman stood, gave a small nod, and walked on. She had offered no explanation of fault, no lesson in forgiveness. She had simply performed the most necessary, healing action. Her silent doing had interrupted the karmic loop of blame and defense and had restored a functional peace. That image has stayed with me as a perfect example of teaching without a single word. The action of picking up the fruit was a more powerful sermon than any could have preached. This is the practice, to become a person who, when faced with the spilled fruit of misunderstanding, reaches not for words to assign blame or claim innocence, but for the simple, healing action that repairs the situation. Your hands, engaged in repair, will always speak more honestly than your tongue, engaged in defense. Let us continue. Settle in a little deeper. Let the weight of your body be fully supported. Imagine a single, steady flame in a room with no drafts. That is the quality of attention we cultivate now. I want to tell you about a blacksmith I once heard of in a mountain village. He made the finest tools for miles around, axes that held their edge, plow blades that turned the tough soil cleanly. People would come to his forge and ask his secret. He would simply smile and return to his work. Heating, hammering, folding the steel, quenching it in just the right way. He never gave a lecture on metallurgy. He never explained his technique. If you watched him, you saw his entire being was in the rhythm, the watchful eye on the color of the metal, the precise force of the hammer, the patience of the cooling. The secret wasn't a formula he could utter, it was the integrity of his process. The result, a tool that could last a generation, was his only answer. People trusted his tools not because of his promises, but because of their performance in their own hands. His life was a lesson in what Buddhism calls right livelihood, but also in something deeper, the unity of intention, action, and result. When these are aligned, explanation becomes superfluous. The work speaks. We often get this backwards. We think the explanation is the proof. We believe if we can articulate our good intentions, we have done enough. But the Buddha's path is one of embodied truth. It asks, what does your life articulate when you are not speaking? Your silent actions are your most honest language. A kind act done quietly teaches more about compassion than a treatise on the subject. Patience practiced in a frustrating moment is a more profound sermon than a lecture on forbearance. The blacksmith's lesson is that mastery is not declared, it is demonstrated through consistent, correct practice over time. Your character is forged in the same way, not in the grand speeches you make about yourself, but in the daily, often unseen, hammer strokes of your choices. Consider your energy as a precious resource, like water in a desert cistern. Every time you engage in a prolonged, unnecessary explanation, you are pouring water onto the sand. It vanishes instantly, leaving nothing behind but a darker patch that soon fades. The ego feels a momentary relief, like the sand drinking the water, but no growth follows. Now imagine instead using that same water to nourish a single, deep-rooted tree. The action is slow, unseen beneath the soil. But over time, the tree grows. It offers shade, fruit, stability. It becomes a landmark. Your silent, consistent actions are like watering that tree. The resource of your attention and intention goes into something that accumulates, that builds a lasting result. The tree, once grown, needs no explanation. Its presence is its purpose. Your life, built through accumulated right actions, becomes its own sanctuary, needing no billboard to announce its value. I remember a woman who joined a community garden project. She was quiet, rarely speaking in meetings. While others debated plot layouts, watering schedules, and the philosophy of communal growing, she simply showed up early. She would mend broken tools left in the shed. She would quietly weed not only her plot, but the neglected edges of the common paths. She built a simple, beautiful compost bin from scrap wood when the old one collapsed. She never put her name on anything. At the end of the season, during a harvest celebration, someone finally stood and said, "Look at all she has done for us," without ever asking for credit. The woman seemed almost embarrassed. She said, the garden needed it to be done. That was all. Her influence in that community was immense, not because of her persuasive words, but because of the tangible, helpful reality she built with her hands. Her actions had woven her seamlessly into the fabric of the place. She had become indispensable through silent contribution, not noisy campaigning. People listened to her rare words because her actions had already earned a deep listening. This is a reflection of the Buddha's own teaching method. He didn't spend all his time defining terms. He taught through parables, through guidelines for living, and most of all, through the palpable quality of his own presence. People were drawn to the result they perceived in him, an unshakable peace. They wanted that result, so they followed the path he outlined. The authority of his teaching came from the evidence of his own life. In your own life, you build authority in the same way. Not by insisting you are in charge, but by being so reliably competent, calm, and ethical that people naturally seek your counsel. Your track record is your resume. Your calm in a crisis is your leadership manual. Your integrity over time is your letter of recommendation. Let's explore a new metaphor. Think of your mind as a vast, still lake at high altitude. The water is so clear you can see the stones at the bottom. This clarity is your innate wisdom. Now, a misunderstanding is like someone on the shore, throwing a pebble into the lake. Plink, a ripple spreads. The ego, identified with the surface of the lake, feels violated. How dare they disturb my perfection? They must be told this is a clear lake. It wants to shout back, to throw a pebble of explanation into its own water to cancel out the first ripple. But this only creates more ripples, more disturbance. The practice of non-attachment is to be the deep water, not the disturbed surface. From the depth, you watch the ripple arise, spread, and gradually dissipate. The pebble sinks to the bottom, becoming just another stone among many. The lake's clarity is not diminished, it incorporates the new stone. The depth is undisturbed. When you identify with the deep, still water of your awareness, the pebbles of others' perceptions cannot shake you. You don't need to explain your clarity to the person throwing pebbles. The clarity is self-evident to anyone who cares to look deeply. This is why meditation is so central. It is the practice of familiarizing yourself with the depth, not the ripples. It's sinking below the churning surface of thoughts and reactions to rest in the silent, knowing bedrock of being. From that place, the need to explain the surface weather feels like a distant, faint concern. You realize you are not the weather. You are the space in which the weather happens. And that space is vast, untroubled, and free. There is a story of a renowned calligrapher who was asked to write a scroll for a temple. He agreed. The head monk, a nervous man, hovered behind him as he prepared his ink and brush. Should it be this character? What style will you use? Will it convey humility? He asked. The calligrapher said nothing. He closed his eyes, took a long, slow breath, and when he opened them, his gaze was utterly focused. In one fluid, uninterrupted motion, his brush swept across the paper. A single, powerful character stood there, alive with energy. It was perfect. The monk, stunned, began to thank him and ask about his technique. The calligrapher held up a hand. The explanation is in the breath before the brush meets the paper. If you wish to understand it, do not analyze the ink. Sit, and still your own mind. He was pointing the monk away from the external artifact and toward the internal state that produced it. The masterpiece was not the character on the scroll, it was the unified mind of the artist in the moment of creation. That mind needed no explanation. Its quality was transmitted directly through the brushstroke. Your life is your brushstroke. The moments where you choose aligned action over defensive talk are the moments your character is drawn on the scroll of the world. No footnote is needed. The energy, the integrity, the intention, they are all there in the line itself, for anyone with the heart to see. Let us continue. Allow your awareness to soften, like dusk settling over a landscape. Details blur, but the sense of space expands. In this space, we'll explore a quieter kind of strength. There is a tale of a lighthouse keeper on a remote, rocky coast. His job was simple: keep the lamp lit, the lens clean, the mechanism wound. For decades, he did this without fanfare. Storms would rage, waves would crash against the cliffs, and ships would sometimes pass too close. He never sent out radio messages explaining the purpose of the light. He never wrote manifestos on maritime safety. He simply maintained the steady, rhythmic flash that pierced the darkness. To the ships at sea, he was not a person with a name or a story. He was a certainty. A pulse of light that said, "Here is danger. Here is safety. Steer this way." His entire life's meaning was communicated through that unwavering, reliable signal. When he finally retired, they found his logbooks perfectly kept, the glass spotless, the gears worn smooth from faithful service. He had never sought to be understood, he had sought to be useful. And in that pure utility, he was profoundly understood by every captain who ever guided their ship by his light. This is a metaphor for a life lived with right intention. Your actions, when clear and consistent, become a signal to the world. They communicate your values more directly than any biography. The lighthouse doesn't argue with the storm, it simply shines. It doesn't get offended if a ship ignores it, its duty is to shine regardless. Your peace comes from tending your own light. Your integrity, your discipline, your compassion, not from controlling which ships heed it. The Buddha's path is about becoming a human lighthouse. Your inner work, meditation, ethical discipline, wisdom study, is the maintenance of the lamp. Your interactions in the world are the light shining out. You cannot force others to see it, but you can ensure it is bright and true. We often live as if we are the ship, not the lighthouse. We bob on the chaotic waves of others' opinions, desperately signaling who we are with flags and flares, hoping to be recognized and guided to safe harbor by external validation. It's an exhausting, precarious existence. The Buddhist teaching invites a radical shift: become the fixed point. Ground yourself in your own ethical bedrock. Let your consistent actions emit the signal. Let others navigate by it as they will. Your worth is not determined by the number of ships that salute you, but by the steadfastness of your beam. I think of a schoolteacher from my past. She taught a difficult subject, and her methods were unconventional: less lecture, more guided discovery. Parents complained. They wanted traditional homework, clear grades, familiar structure. They demanded meetings, explanations for her and proven approach. For a while, she tried to explain the educational philosophy, the research, her intentions. The meetings became debates. She grew weary. Then, she stopped. She politely listened to concerns, thanked parents for their engagement, and then returned to her classroom and simply taught her heart out. She poured her energy into creating moments of genuine understanding for her students. She didn't post defenses on the school portal. She didn't rally other teachers to her cause. At the end of the year, her students presented a project they had developed collaboratively, a project of stunning depth and creativity that solved a real community problem. The results were undeniable. The students' confidence, their skill, their engagement were the only explanation she ever offered. The complaining voices faded. They hadn't been convinced by argument, they had been disarmed by evidence. Her quiet commitment to right action, teaching with integrity, had built a lighthouse that outshone all the fog of doubt. This brings us to a subtle but vital point: trust in process over persuasion. When you trust your process, your ethical compass, your dedicated effort, you are freed from the anxiety of immediate results. The gardener trusts the cycle of seed and harvest. The lighthouse keeper trusts that the light will serve its purpose through the long night. You must learn to trust that a life of aligned action creates its own meaningful results, in its own time. These results may not look like public acclaim. They may look like inner peace, the respect of a few discerning people, or the quiet satisfaction of work well done. But they are durable. They are yours. Explanations, by contrast, are attempts at instant persuasion. They seek a shortcut to understanding, bypassing the slow, organic work of demonstration. They are often born of impatience, a lack of trust in the process. Let me offer a new image. Imagine you are a deep, underground aquifer. Your pure water is your essence, your potential for clarity and love. On the surface, people dig small, shallow wells. They peer into their wells and see a reflection of the sky, or mud, or their own face, and they pronounce judgments about you, the aquifer, based on what they see in their own shallow dig. If you hear that someone's well shows mud, the ego wants to pipe water directly to their well to prove your purity. But that is an endless task. There are countless wells. And in trying to supply them all, you deplete yourself. The wiser way is to simply continue being the deep, pure aquifer. Let your water naturally feed the springs and rivers that flow from you, your actions, your creations, your calm presence. Those who are thirsty will find the rivers. Those who are digging for truth will eventually dig deep enough to find you. Your job is not to service every shallow well with a personalized explanation. Your job is to maintain your depth and purity. The rest is geology and time. A young executive once confided in me about a feeling of being fake. He had a polished persona at work, always saying the right thing, meticulously managing his image. But it was exhausting. He felt like a publicist for a product he wasn't sure he believed in. Himself. His guidance came from trying to anticipate what others wanted to see. I suggested a different approach. For 1 month, he would shift his focus from managing perceptions to managing contributions. Before any meeting or interaction, he would ask, "What is the most useful, true thing I can contribute here?" Not, "How can I appear smart?" but, "How can I be helpful?" He committed to doing this, and to saying nothing about his own workload or cleverness unless directly asked. The first week was terrifying. He felt invisible. But by the second week, he noticed his energy was different. He was listening more, reacting less. He offered one concise, well-considered idea per meeting instead of several showy comments. A month later, his manager called him in. "I've noticed a change," the manager said. "You've become someone the team relies on for substance, not just talk. We're giving you the lead on the new project." The executive had stopped trying to explain his worth through his persona. He had started demonstrating it through quiet, substantive contribution. He was no longer a publicist, he had become the product itself, a reliable, valuable resource. The project's success later became the ultimate explanation of his capabilities, one he never had to utter. This is the quiet power of the Buddha's middle way. It is not the path of the noisy salesperson, forever pitching their own value. Nor is it the path of the hermit, withdrawing all value from the world. It is the path of the artisan, the gardener, the lighthouse keeper, fully engaged in skillful, beneficial action, yet detached from the billboard and the applause. Your work is your voice. Your consistency is your character. Your calm in the face of the storm is your proof. You need not explain the light. You need only keep it burning. Let us continue. Let your attention become like a slow-moving river, winding through a peaceful valley. There is no urgency here. Only flow. I recall a story about a master weaver in a small village. Her tapestries were legendary, not for their loud colors or huge size, but for their profound detail and harmony. People would ask her how she chose her patterns, how she decided which threads to combine. She would simply smile and say, "The cloth tells me." She never explained her art. She would sit at her loom for hours, her hands moving with a quiet certainty, as if she were listening to a silent song woven into the very air. A wealthy merchant once commissioned a piece, demanding to know the theme in advance, the meaning of each symbol. The weaver nodded, took his gold, and began. Months later, she delivered the tapestry. It was breathtaking, a scene of a forest in twilight, so real you could almost feel the damp air and hear the leaves rustle. The merchant, however, was furious. "This is not what I asked for. I wanted a story of conquest and triumph. Explain yourself." The weaver looked at him calmly and said, "This is the story the threads told for you. Look closer. The conquest is in the roots breaking stone. The triumph is in the light finding its way through the canopy." She left without another word. The merchant stared at the tapestry for days. Slowly, he began to see what she meant. The quiet, persistent power in the scene began to speak to him of a different kind of strength than he had envisioned. He never got his explanation, but he received a deeper truth. The weaver was unattached to his initial expectation. She was faithful to the truth of her materials and her craft. The result, the tapestry itself, was the only communication that mattered. This is a beautiful mirror of how we relate to our own lives. We often have a script, a narrative we want to present to the world, the story of our success, our goodness, our intelligence. When life, or other people, fails to follow our script, we feel compelled to step in as directors, explaining the plot, justifying the character's actions. We want to be the weaver who also narrates the tour. But the Buddha's way suggests a different role: be the faithful weaver, not the anxious tour guide. Attend to the quality of each thread. Your present moment intention and action. Trust that the larger pattern will emerge from that faithful attention. If someone misunderstands the pattern, you need not stop the loom to give a lecture on textile symbolism. Keep weaving. The final tapestry, the sum of your days, will have its own eloquence. Consider your mind as an ancient library. The ego is a frantic librarian who believes every visitor must leave with a perfect understanding of the library's cataloging system. So the librarian runs alongside visitors, explaining the Dewey Decimal System, the history of the archives, the proper way to handle a book. The visitors become overwhelmed, they can't hear their own thoughts, can't browse in peace. They leave frustrated, having learned about the library's rules but having touched no wisdom. Now imagine a different librarian. This one keeps the shelves in order, the air clean, the light good. She is present if asked a direct question, but otherwise, she sits quietly at her desk, allowing visitors to discover the books for themselves. This library becomes a place of deep discovery. The silence is not empty, it is full of potential. Your wisdom is the library. Your compulsive explanations are the frantic librarian. Your mindful presence and right action are the maintenance of the shelves. Create the conditions for understanding, but do not force the revelation. Let people browse the reality of your actions. Their discoveries will be their own, and therefore more meaningful. I knew a man who took over a family business from his charismatic, talkative father. His father had been a master explainer, he could give a 2-hour speech on the company's vision. The son was quieter, more introspective. Employees were skeptical. They missed the father's stirring explanations. The son felt pressure to perform, to give speeches. But when he tried, it felt hollow. So he stopped. He decided his speeches would be his daily decisions. He arrived first, left last. He learned every job in the building, not to micromanage, but to understand. When he made a tough call, he would state it clearly, briefly, and then enact it. He didn't call meetings to justify his mindset. At first, the team was confused. Then, they began to notice the results. Fewer chaotic shifts in direction, less drama, more stability, and surprising growth. They began to trust not his rhetoric, but his rhythm. His consistent, principled actions had written a new, more reliable company story, one they could all read clearly in the day-to-day reality of their work. He had substituted the noise of explanation for the signal of integrity. This touches on the Buddhist concept of karma as intentional action. Every time you act with an intention free from the craving to be seen in a certain light, you plant a seed of genuine power. That seed will grow into a result that stands on its own. Every time you act with the primary intention of managing perception, you plant a seed of dependency. That seed grows into a fragile result that needs constant propping up with more explanations. The weaver's intention was to serve the truth of the cloth. The son's intention was to serve the truth of the business. Their focus was on the action itself, not the review of the action. Consequently, the results had a solidity that no critique could dissolve. Let me share a metaphor that came to me while watching a potter's wheel. Your life is the spinning clay. Your hands, guided by intention, are what shape it. The urge to explain is like trying to shape the clay while simultaneously holding up a mirror to show the audience what you're trying to make. Your attention is divided. Your hands slip. The form wobbles. True shaping requires both hands on the clay, your full attention on the feeling of it yielding under your fingers, responding to the slightest pressure. You must become one with the process of shaping. The final pot will be the explanation of your skill. You don't need to pause and describe the technique while the wheel is still spinning. In fact, if you do, you'll ruin the pot. Our lives are the same. We ruin the forming of a beautiful moment, a relationship, a career, by trying to narrate and justify it while it's still happening. Let the wheel spin. Keep your hands steady, your intention clear. The shape will emerge. There is a practice in some traditions called the vow of explanatory silence. It doesn't mean you never speak. It means you refrain from speech whose sole purpose is to shape someone's opinion of you. You speak to inform, to connect, to ask, to answer a real need, but not to manage your image. Try this for an hour. Then a morning. Notice the mental energy it frees up. Notice the space it creates for simply being present. You'll feel the frantic librarian begin to relax. You'll start to hear the silent song of the weaving, the quiet spin of the wheel. You'll realize how much of your inner dialogue was just rehearsing for an audience that was never really listening that closely anyway. The Buddha's path is one of grounded authenticity. It is the opposite of personal branding. A brand needs a slogan, a logo, a consistent message. A person, a true person, needs only authenticity. A tree does not brand itself as providing sturdy shade since 1742. It just provides shade. Its age is in its rings, not its advertisements. When you live from that place of unadorned being, you don't need to explain your roots. People can feel their strength. Let us continue. Sink deeper into repose. Imagine the feeling of sinking into a bed of soft moss, the world above becoming a gentle whisper. Here, in the quiet, we explore the texture of release. There is a story from the high deserts, told by those who navigate by the stars. It speaks of an old guide who led caravans across the trackless sands. He never carried a map. Younger scouts, with their compasses and charts, would challenge him. "How do you know the way?" they would demand. "Explain your route." The old guide would simply point to the horizon, or to a particular rock formation that looked no different from any other to their eyes. He could not give them a formula. His knowledge was in his feet, in his skin feeling the dry wind, in a lifetime of watching the stars turn. It was embodied wisdom. One fateful journey, a sandstorm of unprecedented fury wiped out all visible landmarks and scrambled magnetic fields. The scouts with their instruments were paralyzed, their explanations useless. The old guide paused, knelt, and placed his palm on the sand. He closed his eyes, then stood and walked. The caravan followed. He led them to safety not by a route he could explain, but by a knowing he had become. His certainty was not in his words, but in his being. The results, their lives, were the only validation he or anyone else needed. He was unattached to the modern need for procedural explanation. He was attached to the deeper truth of the desert itself. This story illuminates a cornerstone of Buddhist wisdom, prajna, or intuitive wisdom. It is knowledge that transcends intellectual explanation. It is the knowing of the guide's feet, the weaver's hands, the blacksmith's eye. It is what remains when all concepts are stripped away. Our addiction to explanation is often an attempt to translate this deep, intuitive knowing back into the shaky language of concepts, to make it palatable and defensible to the rational mind and to others. But in that translation, the essence is often lost. The Buddha did not teach a philosophy to be debated, he pointed to an experience to be realized. He said, "Come and see." The invitation was to walk the path, not to endlessly describe it from the sidelines. Your intuitive knowing about your own life, what is right, what is aligned, is your inner guide. When you constantly explain yourself, you are mistrusting that guide. You are asking the rational mind to get a second opinion from the social world, and it will always lead you into circles. Think of your spirit as a clear, high-altitude lake. The intuitive wisdom is the still, deep water at the center. The rational mind is the activity at the shore, fetching water, analyzing it, pouring it into containers. Explaining is like trying to bring the entire lake to someone in a cup and then describing the lake based on that cup. It's a reduction. It creates misunderstanding because the cup, your words, can never hold the whole truth. The other person may judge the lake as too cold, too still, based on your cupful. Your urge is to fetch another cup, with different water, to correct them. But this is endless. The wiser way is to invite them to the shore. To say, through your calm and open presence, "Come, sit by the water." Experience it for yourself. Your life, lived with integrity, is that invitation. Your actions are the path to the shore. Not everyone will come. But your duty is to keep the water clear, not to frantically deliver samples. I remember a woman, a midwife, who practiced in a traditional community slowly being overtaken by modern medicine. The younger doctors dismissed her methods as folk practice, unscientific. They demanded explanations for her techniques, most of which had been passed down through touch and feeling, not textbooks. For a time, she tried to justify herself, using their language. It felt foreign and clumsy. Then she stopped. She said, "I cannot explain the wind, but I know when it will rain. I cannot explain life, but I know how to help it into the world." She continued her work, quietly. She was present for births where technology failed, where a mother's fear needed calming more than monitoring. Her success rate, her connection with families, became local legend. The doctors couldn't explain it with their charts, but they could not deny the result: healthy mothers, welcomed babies, and a profound sense of peace in her presence. She hadn't won an argument. She had demonstrated a different kind of knowing. Her attachment was to the service of life, not to the title of expert. By releasing her need for that title, she embodied the true expertise of compassionate presence. The results built a bridge of respect that no explanation could have constructed. This is the practice of non-clinging to views. The Buddha cautioned against becoming attached even to right views, because attachment itself is the problem. When you are attached to being seen as knowledgeable, kind, or righteous, that very attachment distorts your action. You act to protect the view, not to serve the moment. The midwife was not attached to the view of herself as a healer, she was committed to the act of healing. There is a world of difference. One is a statue to be defended. The other is a river, flowing to where it is needed. Let me offer a new metaphor. Imagine you are a mountain. Your core values and integrity are the bedrock. Weather systems swirl around your peaks, these are the opinions, criticisms, and misunderstandings of the world. Some bring cold rain, some bring blinding fog, some bring a brilliant, clarifying sun. The mountain does not engage with the weather. It does not explain to the rain that it is solid, or argue with the fog about its true height. It stands. It allows the weather to expend its energy against its immutable presence. Over time, the very shape of the mountain, worn smooth here, revealed stark there, is a record of all the weather it has endured, yet it remains, fundamentally, the mountain. When you identify as the mountain, not the weather, you find an unshakable stability. The urge to explain is the mountain trying to talk to the storm. It is futile and beneath its dignity. Your practice is to return to the feeling of bedrock, of unassailable presence, whenever the social weather turns against you. A friend, an artist, struggled with this. Every painting was followed by an agony of interpretation. He would write artist statements, trying to preempt criticism and guide viewers to the correct feeling. The statements became longer than the time he spent painting. The paintings themselves grew stiff, trying to illustrate the statements. He hit a wall. On a retreat, he was given a simple instruction: for the next piece, he was forbidden to explain it, even to himself. He was to paint only what his hand wanted to paint, with no story attached. The process was infuriating at first, then liberating. The painting that emerged was chaotic, raw, and alive in a way his previous work was not. When someone asked him what it meant, he heard himself say, "I don't know." "What does it mean to you?" That surrender of explanatory control opened a door. People engaged with the painting more deeply because they weren't comparing it to his statement. They brought their own weather to his mountain, and the painting just stood there, allowing it. His artistic peace was born in that release. He learned that the meaning of his work was not a secret to be explained, but a space to be shared. The Buddha taught the two truths doctrine: conventional truth, the world of words, explanations, and appearances, and ultimate truth, the ineffable nature of reality. Our suffering often comes from clinging to conventional truth as if it were ultimate. We believe the explanation is the reality. It is not. The explanation is a finger pointing at the moon. Do not mistake the finger for the moon. Do not spend your life arguing about the cleanliness of the finger while missing the brilliant, silent moon it points to. Your life is the moon. Your words can, at best, be a clean finger pointing to it. But most of our explanations are just us nervously polishing our own finger, worried others will judge it, while the moon shines on, unnoticed. Let the moon be enough. Let us continue. Allow your awareness to become like a vast, open sky at dusk. The busy colors of day soften into deeper hues. There is room here. Infinite room. There is a story of a bell in a forgotten temple tower. It was cast centuries ago, perfectly balanced, with a pure tone. Over generations, the temple fell into disuse. Ivy crept up the tower, and the bell was silent for 100 years. People passing by would whisper, "That bell is broken. It is just a relic." They judged it by its silence, by its covering of vines. No one explained that it was still whole. Then, a great storm came. A branch, torn from a nearby tree, swung and struck the bell. A single, deep, resonant note rang out, clear and pure, washing over the village. It vibrated in the chest of every person who heard it. In that moment, no explanation was needed. The bell's true nature was revealed not by a discourse on metallurgy, but by its own inherent sound when struck. The vines of neglect and assumption fell away in the minds of the listeners. The bell had never needed to protest its wholeness. It only needed to be what it was, waiting for the right conditions to sing. You are that bell. Your essential nature. Your capacity for peace, clarity, and love, is intact, whole. The world may cover you with vines of misunderstanding, judgment, and labels. You may spend years trying to verbally pick off those vines, explaining, "I am not broken. See, here is the alloy of my character, here is the craftsmanship of my intentions." But this is a futile struggle against perception. The Buddhist path is not about removing the vines through argument. It is about knowing your fundamental wholeness so deeply that the vines are seen as temporary, external. And then, through the consistent quality of your being, your actions, your presence, you create the conditions where life itself will eventually strike the true note. Your sound, when it rings out in a moment of integrity, patience, or compassion, will do more to reveal you than a lifetime of self-description. Consider your identity as a constellation of habits, memories, and self-concepts. It is a useful fiction, like a map. But you are not the map. You are the territory. When someone misunderstands you, they are misreading the map. The frantic urge to explain is you, the territory, trying to redraw their map for them. It is a logical absurdity. The territory does not need the map's validation. It simply exists. Your suffering arises when you, the territory, forget your vastness and become obsessed with the correctness of a small, hand-drawn chart held in someone else's mind. Your practice is to feel the solid ground of your own existence beneath you, the truth of your breath, your awareness, your beating heart. From that grounded place, the inaccuracies on other people's maps become interesting but ultimately irrelevant details. You cannot force them to survey you more accurately. You can only continue to be the rich, complex landscape that you are. I recall a man who inherited a small, struggling bookstore. In the age of algorithms and instant downloads, everyone had an opinion. You need a social media voice. Explain your curation process. Create a brand narrative. He tried for a while, but it felt hollow. He was a reader, not a marketer. So he stopped explaining. He did one thing, He read every book he stocked. When a customer wandered in, he wouldn't pitch or explain themes. If they looked lost, he might say, "If you tell me the last book you loved, I might know the next one you will." And he usually did. He created a space of quiet discovery, not noisy sales. He didn't explain the why of his store. The store itself, the smell of paper, the careful shelves, the proprietor's genuine spark when discussing a forgotten novel, became the why. It was an oasis. People didn't come because of his mission statement, they came because being in the store felt like a bomb. His success was not viral or explosive. It was deep and sustaining. The store survived and thrived because he had attached to the essence of being a bookseller, not to the idea of being seen as one. The result was a living testament that needed no billboard. This aligns with the Buddhist teaching on right mindfulness and right concentration. Mindfulness is knowing the territory of your present experience. Concentration is the ability to rest there, undistracted by the maps others are waving around. When you are fully present with what is. The feel of the book in your hand, the need of the customer before you, the truth of your next right action, you have no attention left for managing peripheral perceptions. You are fully engaged in the reality of your life, not the public relations campaign about it. This full engagement is what makes your actions potent and authentic. It's what makes the bell ring true. Let me offer a metaphor of sound itself. Imagine your true self as a silent, fundamental tone, a quiet hum of being. Every time you act from ego, from a need to explain or defend, you create a discordant note that clashes with this fundamental tone. Your life becomes a cacophony. The practice of non-attachment is the process of ceasing to create those discordant notes. You let the clashes of misunderstanding simply arise and pass without adding your own reactive noise to them. In the resulting silence, or in the simple, clear notes of right action, your fundamental tone can be heard. It is subtle, but it is steady. And to those who are listening for truth, it is more attractive than any loud, complicated symphony of self-justification. Your consistent calm becomes that recognizable tone. People may not be able to name it, but they will feel steadied in its presence. There is a practice in some wisdom traditions called the mirror of silence. When someone projects an image onto you, anger, incompetence, malice, you do not argue with the projection. You simply remain clear and still, like a clean mirror. Their projection hits the mirror and reflects back to them. This is not done with coldness, but with compassionate space. By not accepting the hook of their misunderstanding, by not fighting their phantom, you allow them to see their own reflection. Sometimes, this is what is needed for them to recognize their own state. Your silence is the mirror. Your non-engagement is the clarity that allows for their self-reflection. Any explanation from you would be like smearing grease on the mirror, it would distort the reflection and involve you in the mess. The Buddha often used silence this way. He allowed questions to hang in the air, or answered a profound question with a deeper silence, letting the seeker confront the echo of their own mind. It was a teaching more powerful than words. A final, personal story. Years ago, I was part of a community project that failed. It was a public failure, and blame was being assigned freely. My role was minor, but my name was mentioned. The urge to write a public post, to outline my limited involvement, to explain the context, was overwhelming. I drafted it 3 times. But each time, I heard the teaching, does this serve truth, or does it serve my pride? It was serving my pride. I wanted to separate myself from the failure, to protect my personal map of being competent. I deleted the drafts. I did nothing. I felt the heat of the misunderstanding, the fear of a ruined reputation. I let it burn. It was uncomfortable. Weeks later, a core organizer, someone I respected deeply, reached out privately. She said, "I noticed you didn't jump into the fray to save your own skin. That took integrity. I want to work with you on the next thing." My silent inaction, my refusal to explain, had communicated more about my character than any well-crafted defense ever could. It had acted as a filter, separating reactive noise from discerning respect. The result was a deeper, more trusting collaboration. The misunderstanding in the wider world simply evaporated, as most do, for lack of fuel. This is the essence: let your life be the statement, and let time be the editor. Do not publish daily errata on your own character. Live in such a way that the record, when read in full, is coherent and true. The occasional misprint will not change the meaning of the book. Let us come to a close. Let your breath be soft, your mind open like the palm of a hand, holding nothing, ready for everything. All these stories, the potter, the fisherman, the lighthouse keeper, the weaver, the desert guide, the bell, the bookseller, are not really about them. They are about you. They are mirrors held up to a single, profound truth that the Buddha taught. Freedom is found not in controlling the reflection, but in realizing you are the light that makes the reflection possible. Your endless explanations have been an attempt to sculpt your reflection in every pool of water you pass. You have tired yourself, muddying the water with your efforts, never satisfied, always fearing the next wind will distort the image again. The practice we have explored is the radical act of turning away from the pool. It is walking to the source of the light itself, your own conscious presence, your capacity for wise and compassionate action. This is not a passive life. It is the most active life imaginable. It is the life of the blacksmith at his forge, the gardener tending the vine, the midwife serving life. It is action purified of the desperate need for a specific echo. You act because it is true, because it is kind, because it is needed. You speak when it will bring clarity, and you hold silence when it will bring peace. You are no longer a prisoner of the because, forever justifying your existence. You simply exist, and from that grounded being, your actions flow like a clean river. The ultimate result of this practice is not that everyone finally understands you. That will never happen. The ultimate result is that you no longer need them to. You have found an understanding within yourself that is complete. You have met your own approval in the silent fidelity of your actions. This inner approval is not arrogant, it is quiet, humble, and unshakable. It is the approval of the tree for its own growth, the mountain for its own mass. It needs no external validation. So tonight, as you prepare to leave this shared space, carry this simple knowing: you are the bell, whole and resonant. You are the lighthouse, steady and beaming. You are the weaver, and your life is the cloth appearing under your own attentive hands. Let the world think what it will. Your truth is not in their thoughts. Your truth is in the next stitch you weave, the next step you take with integrity, the next breath you take in peace. Let your results speak. Let your consistency be your argument. Let your calm be your victory. And in the spacious silence you cultivate, may you hear, at last, your own fundamental tone, the sound of your own freedom. Thank you for being here, in the monk's temple. May you carry this peace with you. If you wish to return to this space of silent wisdom, consider subscribing. It is a simple way to keep the path clear, whenever you need to find your way home. Rest now. The teaching is complete.